And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Seth Leaf, musician, songwriter, and author who has had multiple near-death experiences. Seth, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Seth, I think we need a little bit of backstory before we get into one of your main NDEs. So can we please start there?
Absolutely. So the backstory to this is really fascinating because it's not just my experience. From what I can tell, when people have near-death experiences and it just rocks their world, it shakes them to the core, there's a collective element of it that has some effect on everybody and everything. And so the backstory is when I was a kid, before I 3, 4 years old, my earliest memories, I didn't have a lot of language memorized. I was out in the woods. I was just like in a perfect young child situation. My mother and father loved me and my brother. And my earliest memories are going to sit outside and in the front yard and look at the tree line where the trees and the sky meet. And the longer that I would stare at that, everything would get bright. Like literally, this bright field of awareness just kept getting brighter and brighter. And the trees and the sky would almost disappear because this bright sensation was so powerful and predominant. And as I grew up and evolved more, I realized it was my soul, or better yet, my energy field, which is life force, which is something all of us have. Whether we are awake or asleep, each one of us has this profound life force that is beyond genius intelligence. It knows how to operate our body, knows how to cause all these complex systems to work together, the heartbeat, all of it. And when we start to know ourselves as that, which we all did, we all had this deeper knowing. And it was before we learned language, right? Because language is what is taught to us. Belief systems are what is taught to us. And a lot of it is through language. But every single one of us, as we were in utero and when we were born, there was awareness that was there, but no language or belief systems that caused us to just narrow our focus and unintentionally letting go from knowing this life force that we all are and that everything is. And why that's important for me is because of all the near-death experiences that I had, that same thing would always happen. Now, as I grew up and I got older, I began to lose touch with that. We moved. I was 11, 12 years old. I got bullied really bad. I just went through a lot of stuff that a lot of other children go through. And I forgot what that feeling and that experience was. And also, nobody told me about it. Like, they were never like, okay, what you're doing right now, you're in a state of heart and brain coherence. And if you just keep focusing on that, you're going to amplify your own perception of it and amplify this life force so that you can really grow and evolve at a much quicker level. But nobody told me that. And I had no idea. And so I forgot it. And that's when I started getting crazy, just taking huge risks. The trauma of getting bullied and a bunch of other terrible stuff that happened. I was trying to find out like who I really was and why I was alive, because I quit school. I moved deep, deep into the woods because it's what I know. And very malnourished, struggling tremendously, just eating little bits of food here and there, drinking water mostly, catching a fish every now and then. It was very, very difficult. And that's when I started having these experiences that were bringing me to the edge of myself, you could say. And I got into a car accident. And in that car accident, it was crazy because, and this kind of relates to your channel, but the guy driving was a close friend of one of my best friends. And so there was me, him, he was an older guy, and then two of my friends in the car. And one of the kids in the back goes, "Oh my God, look, a UFO, look, look." And he like puts his head around the steering wheel to look up and see it and just drifts into the other lane and hits a Suburban, boom, head on, 65-mile-an-hour head on collision. And immediately my whole world just, like, I watched the whole thing happen. Like as he was just drifting in the other lane, I saw that car and I just was like, what? Boom, it hit. But in the moments of the impact, I literally was outside of my body looking at this whole thing happening, and all kinds of things were happening. There was all this communication taking place. There was all of this memory of what this life force is and what it has the potential to be, and all of that. And when the crash ended, the engine was in the cockpit, was like right in the front of the car. The engine was sitting next to us, smoke and all of that. I didn't even get hurt, but what blew my mind was that I had that out of body experience. And that shook me up more than the actual accident did. But here's where, so that happened. I didn't know how to make sense of it. Nobody knew. There wasn't like spiritual books that I had access to. I was deep in the woods of Maine. And so I became very reclusive, and this is before the internet. It was nothing really going on. It was just, in Maine, it was woods and that's it, lakes and streams and rivers and springs. And so I was working at a farm because for the longest time I was only getting food stamps and eating just a little bit of food every day when I could get it, just barely enough to survive. But it definitely malnourished me, and I had a lot of health issues. So I decided to get a job, and the job was that I meet with a person who has this farm, and the guy went to school for soil. Like, so he learned how to make soil so that the biggest pumpkins and the biggest cucumbers, everything he grew was huge. And he actually got shot by a cop like a couple decades before, and he had a lead bullet that was never removed out of his ass, actually. And he was kind of, you could tell like he was so brilliant. And then all of a sudden things would kind of go into this other way. And I was out in the field, was tilling up his garden, getting things going with another friend of mine. And the other friend of mine was the only person that I was actually close to and had a friendship with. And he was, he'd struggled way more than I had. So we had that in common. And we're out there just in the garden. And then all of a sudden, I feel my heart just like pounding, really, really intense. And, I looked over at him and I was like, bro, something's happening here. And so I got down on my hands and knees and I was just trying to breathe. And then it seemed like it was going away. But then as soon as I got up again, when you get up really quick and there's stars and you get that head rush thing, that happened and my heart just started like so hard. And as that was occurring, and this is not on drugs, this is high on life. Like literally, I didn't know this at the time, but as I tried to process that and make sense with it, it all began to reveal itself for what it is. But as I'm having what feels like a heart attack, there's literally spirits that were just coming out of everywhere. Animal spirits, human spirits, native people. I mean, all kinds of different dimensions and layers and levels of spirits, disembodied spirits. And it was like everything became energy. the world around, everything that I saw was way more energy than it was matter. And these spirits were, some of them were attacking me, others were like trying to help me. It was a mess. And my friend walked away. I could feel myself convulsing, and I hit the ground. And as I'm going through this process, this feeling where I'm dying, and all these other spirits are attacking me or guiding me, all of it, they're all doing everything. I went out. I just completely went unconscious, but there was still awareness there, like this life force that causes the heart to beat, that was there. And so me as this soul, as this energy that I am and that everybody is, whether they know it or not, that had its own journey that it was going through.
This happened after your car accident?
Yeah.
And because you were so malnourished from not eating that you just were weak and you think you had some sort of heart attack?
I mean, I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't do anything like that. There wasn't even a hospital nearby, but yeah, I'd ride my bike, 25 to 50 miles, 4 or 5 days a week just to get food because the closest store was 25 miles. And so, yeah, I just was not a very healthy. I was 18 by that point. The other car accident happened when I was 15, the one that I first described. And so I'm out there. As soon as I hit the ground and my body's convulsing, my life literally flashed before my eyes, but in reverse. It was like everything I experienced in this life up to that moment where my body's convulsing and going out, it all flashed before my eyes. Like, but it didn't stop there. It was all these other life cycles that maybe they're past lives, maybe they're just other lives. It's hard to say exactly, but all these other life cycles in reverse were just boom, from death to life, back and back and back. One different life cycle before another. And it just kept doing that like infinitely, it seemed like. And it was so much information that, I mean, obviously I couldn't process that in my human form. But as I disconnected and that life force was there, that life force was processing all of this. And it seemed like the memory of everything that was happening was already there. And it almost like made an agreement that it was coming. Basically, it had lived through all of this to come to this point where the near death experience, or whatever you want to call it, like it's it's the life force of reality that causes the heart to beat and all these systems, and it's got its own cycles that it goes through. And again, the information of it was so great that I wasn't able to be in this body to process it. And so I got ripped out, all these spirits attacking me, some trying to help me. It was just all over the place. It was just a mess. And all these life cycles, everything is happening. And it was like trillions of eyes were watching me as this was all happening. And it was like the life force or the soul was brought to this place where it was like a cosmic court. That's the only way I've really known how to, describe it. And so it's like everything was there. All the lifetimes, this life, all those other ones, it all created like almost like an accounting system. And it seemed like the accounting was like going into the negative. There were like good deeds and stuff there, but it seemed like it was a lot more negative. And so I could feel myself literally like slipping into a hell or like it was going into that. And as it was getting way more intense, I started to literally feel all these eyes watching me and judging me and basically saying, yeah, this is too bad. You had a chance to make it right, to evolve and to grow and to be, what your soul, your life force always had the potential to be, but you forgot. And here it is. Now you remember it and too late. And I could feel everything just kept getting darker and darker. And again, this is happening outside of my normal human comprehension. It's so, which makes it really difficult to describe. But again, I was 18 and I've been processing it for decades.
Do you think you wandered off into the lower astral realms?
Definitely. Definitely I did. But that was at first. And as I was in that, like where it felt like I was going into those low realms, that hellish like landscape, it was almost like I was in purgatory and I was going to hell. And there was a part of me that just was not going to accept that as being my fate. And it was so weird because in that inner knowing of this life force disembodied from my body, this life force was literally just like losing it. It's like, no, it's not going to let itself be incarcerated into hell. And then all these spirits were there and they're all like bringing me down. And I just remembered, like, no, there's something way greater. This is not my fate. And as I began to realize that, I came out of it and I was in my body, but I had the memory of everything that just happened. And I was like extremely traumatized. Not traumatized isn't even the word. It's like, again, it's like too much information to even begin to process. But now that I was back in my body, all these spirits, everything are dive bombing me. They're all like, I felt like I came back and I had extreme paranoid schizophrenia or something like that. And I started calling out for my friend and he didn't answer. So I walked around, and the guy who lived there, his house was like a barn, literally, like goats and chickens. Animals would walk in and out of it. He slept upstairs. And I went in, and my friend was in the house barn or whatever. And I was yelling to him, and he didn't look at me. He didn't answer. He was just like really still staying there. And I could feel a voice, but it wasn't English. It was like, was this deep knowing. It almost sounded like my voice, but it wasn't me saying it. And essentially, the message was like, you know what this is. And again, I feel like I'm in hell. I feel like I've come back with the most extreme schizophrenic, manic depressive state of being ever. So I couldn't receive the message, even though I heard it and felt it. But then I did it again. It did it again, sorry. And when it made that connection and it said, you know what this is, the same part of me that was like when I wasn't going to accept the fate of being carried into hell at the level of that soul, of that life force, that same feeling of like, no, not accepting that. I like, essentially, I know that my life is good. I know that I have these higher qualities, solid moral compass, all of that. There's a knowing that that was there. And that was what brought me out of that purgatory, but all the hell stuff was still there. And that voice that said, you know what this is, was that same energy that allowed me to get out of the purgatory. And when I heard that voice again, I knew what it was and I knew it was correct. I knew that I was aware of exactly why this was happening. And as soon as I accepted that, all the evil, all the torment, all the pain of all these different life cycles, it went away, completely disappeared. And what was left were, again, all these layers and levels and dimensions of life force and how they're not separate from each other, but it's like this huge, giant wheel of life that is just spiraling infinitely. It's almost like DNA, or it is the web of life. And I got to this point where I remembered my place in it. And it was like when I remembered that and I was experiencing myself and where I came from, everybody that I loved and cared about, their energy was there, assuring me that I am totally completing this task. I'm evolving, I'm growing. And all of my ancestors, all of everything, it was like every answer to every question that I could ever have was just self-evident. And in knowing all of that, these beings that it seemed like they were the hell, like demons and spirits that were attacking me, they weren't actually that. They were just going through this thing where I was so stuck in like these negative cycles that are both in this life and that are also in the life force that carries through to these lifetimes. And these beings revealed themselves as they really are. I guess they're angels. I mean, I don't know how to say it, but in them is every face, every type of animal, everything. Like everybody and everything is in these beings. And I mean, they're angels and they started just teaching. Sorry,
Let me ask you
it's
something
hard.
here. Let me
Yeah.
ask you something here. And this may or not be true for you, but I'm just curious. Is it possible what was going on for you was that you were resisting the whole thing, which created these negative cycles and this perception of terrible things happening? And once you surrendered, everything became okay.
You hit it. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it was. But at the same time, like, it's so scary and it's so intense that it's hard to not resist, And because it's like all of your shit comes up, like everything that you are and that has brought you to that moment, it's all there. And it's like you feel so guilty and you feel so much shame, but at the same time, all of that comes from something that is so pure and innocent and powerful, life force, And so it was like a purging. And I just stopped resisting it, like you said. And that's when it completely turned around.
When all these negative things of your past came up, was it only you that was judging yourself, nobody else?
See, this is a great, great question because in the beginning, I felt like I was being judged by everybody around everybody. I mean, by these spirits and everything that was happening, the past lives or just the collective lives that I was experiencing. It felt like I was being judged, and that was the cosmic court part of it, and that's why I called it that. But then as it all began to resolve and I let go of the resistance and I surrendered into the experience, then yeah, it felt like I judged myself just to clear out so that I could get to this place of being empowered again and remembering myself as that and remembering everybody else as that too, because that was part of it. One of the main things was like, it showed me how everybody is this, but the amount of those who know it and live in harmony with it is very small. But that's the paradox because we're not separate from this. We are absolutely all, there's nothing we can be but this. But we've been born into a realm where all of we like project this illusion and everybody focuses on the illusion more than what is actual. We focus on everything external to us and we hardly ever focus on the internal, this life force. It's intense. Really, really. Yeah.
After this happened, did you have any new abilities that could be considered psychic?
So for about a year to a year and a half after that happened, these beings worked with me. They were always there every day. It was like I was living in what felt like heaven on earth. And I was always so the experience was so intense that it opened up all the, I guess, like the amplitude of my body's own natural circuitry that we all have, the neurons and the plexus centers and everything that is essentially like brains. All of that got zapped so hard that it was able to withstand a much higher amplitude of energy. And this allowed me to be able to perceive all of this at a much more proficient level. And because I was able to perceive it more and I had more energy in my being and my perceptual abilities, yeah, everything was energy. And I didn't go out very much after that. I hardly ate or slept. It was like I was in this state for over a year. But then it got to a point where, I was 18 years old. I was still a kid. I was really just not, I was really immature. And after about a year of it, I realized the responsibility is like to live as this being with solid moral compass. Like it required that I live with a lot more maturity than I actually had at that point. And so when I would go out, I went and visited my mother and father who I hadn't seen for a very long time. And they were shocked because anytime I would go near anybody, all that I could see was their own life cycles and who they are and what it was that brought them right to where they are at that moment. But everybody that I went around was afraid. They became afraid of me and afraid of the experience. And also because they didn't know how to control it or regulate it. It was just like wide open. It's just like pulsing through me, like just like the heartbeat, but it was like cosmic sonic levels of it is what it felt like. And of course, I couldn't create healthy relationships with others because it's all I could see is this. And then I started feeling like, okay, I'm not ready to be this person that it's asking me to be. And, I hadn't been with a girlfriend. I wanted to be able to relate to other people instead of having them be afraid of me. And I started going to concerts. And it was at a concert where I met a bunch of people. We all were hanging out together. They were all around my age, and they were snorting heroin and cocaine. And, at first I'm like, no way. But hanging out with them, after it was over, I went and stayed with them for a long time, and I just started doing it. And I noticed that as I would do the heroin, it would numb my awareness of all of this huge responsibility that I was very perplexed by at that point in my life. And the more I did heroin, the more numb it would get, and the more I felt like I could relate to other people, even though we were all young and obviously doing severe drugs that are brutal, but it allowed me to have these people as friends, to be with a woman that I loved, a girl, I guess. She's so young. We were all young back then. But it allowed me to be able to relate to people and not scare the heck out of them, which was just happening normally. So yeah, it all went into that. And for 3 years, I had a brutal habit, like almost $1,000 a day habit. It was extreme. And a lot of the people that I loved and knew, and they died. Some went to prison, spent like decades, all like total. It all ended in tragedy, obviously. So I wasn't ready. Like, that one experience shook me up so much. And it took going through all of these different, really extreme circumstances, because I was making terrible decisions. I was reckless with my own life. And even though I knew I could tap into all of the instinctual and intuitive and rational thinking that would allow me to move through any challenge in my life, I wasn't doing that. Just trying to act like it didn't happen, because again, it felt like it was so much of a responsibility. And then I got into another car accident, like the third year of doing that heroin, that huge amount every day. And I was driving down the highway, I was flying. I had an old Saab 900. And out of nowhere, and I was totally jonesing. I didn't have any drugs on me, and I was trying to get to Portland where somebody I knew had it was. And I'm literally doing 90 miles an hour, and a deer is just in the road, and I hit it head on. Same thing, the engine just dropped into the cockpit. Like, the whole thing was like, just, it was so severe. And again, I went through, it was almost like the initial NDE that I had, the same thing happened, but because of the heroin, because of the choice of me not being ready to take responsibility for all of that, it was a warning. And it was really clear, like, you know what you are. You can run and hide, but you can't bypass this. Everybody faces it when they leave this world, or almost everybody. Some probably make it through in other ways. But there's no get out of jail free pass. Like, this is here, this is now. And interestingly, years later, I ended up in prison, spent 3 years in there for a nonviolent pot charge. And that was actually where I finally turned all of my bypassing, all of my addiction, everything. I made a choice to move beyond all of that and get into these states of heart and brain coherence is really the basis for it. It's like when your heart and brain, because again, we're all life force, and this life force is always communicating throughout all the organs and glands and cells of our body. But when we're in a state of stress or denial, we're actually impeding our body's life force from doing what it knows how to do, which is survive and grow and hopefully thrive and all of that. And by the time I had come to terms with all of that, I was literally at a point where I made peace with myself. I made peace with what I've always tried to escape from. And then it was like all of it came back to me. And I would get into these states which are so simple. Like, all it really was just slowing my breathing down. And as my breathing is slowed down, I'm relaxing my body. And then just putting a little inner smile on my face. And then, because when we smile, it feels like we're happy, or it feels like something like that. And even though everything in my environment in prison was like, you got nothing to smile about, there's nothing to be happy about, I chose to do the opposite of what my environment was suggesting. So people fighting or what, like, okay, that's a reminder for me to relax even more and to put that little smile on my face and just feel how grateful I am that I'm still alive after all of that. And I made a habit. I literally made a habit. And when I would forget and something intense would happen, that was my reminder to get right back into the state. And I've been doing that ever since. and it works. Took a while before it became a habit, but
At what point did you become a musician?
it was always in me. I played guitar since I was probably 12. My father got me a little electric guitar, and my mother had an acoustic. And so I played guitar for a long time, on and off. There were periods that I didn't play, but I always played it. There weren't too many gaps of space where I didn't play. But when I was in prison, they would let us out during the day, and there was a hobby craft room. And I walked in there, and there was all these guitars, and these guys were sitting there playing. They're playing Stairway to Heaven, and they're just playing it, and so I just started singing it. And that's when I realized, like, whoa, okay, my voice came out of nowhere. I could just suddenly sing like that. And I think because I carried so much throughout my life that parts of me were just trapped. And by the time I arrived in prison after being on pretrial and that whole nightmare for a year and a half, most of my hangups and inhibitions were just gone. And so I started singing. And then we just kept doing it. Every time they'd let us out, we would play music. And then before long, lots of inmates were coming in there and just watching and listening and enjoying it, and captive audience. There's nowhere for them to go anyway. But yeah, that's what allowed me to grow into being a better musician.
Do you fear death?
No, not anymore. I mean, there's parts of me I much prefer to live, you know, but from everything that I went through, death isn't the end. And in fact, it's not even remotely anything near the end, because we come from this energy, right? This creative life force energy. We come from it and we go to it, and the energy never disappears. But for some reason, we don't face it while we're here alive with it. We just fear it when we are supposed to die. But it wants, and this is from my perspective, it's trying to get our attention. It was always trying to get my attention. And when I finally just started giving it attention and focusing on it and allowing that to influence me rather than society or, other people's thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and actions, it primed me to have so much faith and trust and strength, nothing was scary anymore. Now, obviously, I keep myself bright and aware. My ability to think rationally, my intuition and my heart, my instinct and my gut, they're all working together in coherence. And so I have tremendous reverence for life and trust and gratitude. And that allows me to trust whatever is happening rather than project my fear into it.
I didn't mention this in the beginning, but you also teach meditation. What technique or procedure do you teach?
So the whole time that these beings from when I was 18, that whole year to year and a half after that happened, they taught me a lot, but it's not in English. It's very much sound related. And it's really just about getting into that state of being where you're so connected with your soul or your life force, and it. That knowing compresses the life force, and it allows you to be able to have a higher amplitude of energy potential that is concentrated in your being. And in doing that, it's almost like you take all the different parts of yourself that are spread out, whether it's the quantum field or what, like, seems like we have all these different aspects of ourself that are all spread out throughout infinity. And when we get into these states and we remember how to do it, it all compresses into one thing, and you're aware of it and you're in it. But I noticed when I would try to explain this to these men in prison, they didn't know what I was talking about. But when I would get calm and I would breathe really gently, excuse me, and I'd put that little inner smile, when I spoke like that, they got it. And so I just was like, okay, well, let's close our eyes. Let's get into this space. Let's get our heart and brain and all of the organs and glands and cells of our body, let's get them communicating the way they normally do, with us being the observer, not feeling like we need to like create a specific outcome. And so it all just came naturally. And it worked so well because a lot of these guys were inner city men, they didn't really know much about meditation or anything like that. But I never really called it meditation to them. It was just a state of being that I got into, that I knew what that was for me, and it worked for them. So that's really how it happened.
Have you been able to write songs about your experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I told you is only the beginning. I fell into a frozen lake and got hypothermia, and it almost killed me. Same thing. I went into all these different dimensions, and I almost didn't make it out on that one. And I've had a lot of other. I overdosed on heroin and cocaine many times, 8 or 9, like waking up in vomit and piss and just brutal. But no matter what caused this process to happen, where you come to the edge of who you think you are and you confront the energy that you really are, but that the world has taught us not to focus on. When you come, or when I would come to that place and focus on it, it was the same thing like I was feeling as a child, like when I first described going out in the front yard and staring at the tree line and everything becoming white, becoming energy, frequency, but it's intelligent, it's organized, it's in coherence with itself. So yeah, when that happens, then things just start to make sense.
You have a book called The Fight to Enlight. Is it about your NDE or what?
Mhm. I wrote So first of all, I had never planned on writing a book and publishing it. I wrote it while I was incarcerated because I wanted to make sense of a life that so much so much power and beauty and so much brutality at the same time. And my first instinct was like, okay, I need to write out everything that I remember about my life so that I can look for patterns, self-defeating patterns. Because yeah, I was selling pot, but 3 years in prison for it, like, so I knew I broke the law, but I knew that there was deeper patterns that I wasn't consciously acknowledging them. And so I wrote the book to make sense of my life. And right away, I saw these patterns that kept repeating. And of course, in prison, there's not a lot to do. And so everybody's in everybody's business. And some of the men noticed that I was writing a book, or it looked like it was 1,050 handwritten pages. It was huge. And they asked to read it. And it was like, it's the stuff that I wouldn't ever want anybody to read because it's so personal. But they kept begging me to read it. They wanted to. And so I let a few of them read it. And then they told others, and then more read it. And at that point, I trusted. Well, it wasn't even that I trusted. I just didn't care what anybody thought at that point. And I could see the positive effect it was having on people. And then, yeah, enough of them just kept telling me, you got to put this out. This will help people who have struggled with drug addiction, everything that you went through, these near-death experiences that they're very difficult to make sense of, after the fact. When it's happening, whether no matter what your level of perceptual development is. It's just happening. And some people say they don't remember, but I don't know. In most of the ones I had, I remember and I knew what was happening when it seemed like I wasn't in my body.
Has performing live ever been some sort of metaphysical experience for you? Like when you're performing, you become the music?
Very much so. And you know what's amazing too is I do these meditations every week, and I do them online, I do them in person up here, and I've been doing them for a while. And I always have either I'll play music or I'll have other musicians accompany me. And it's all like, don't worry about it. You just follow the tone of my voice and where it's going. And it's worked with everybody. And so whether it's me playing music or someone else, it's almost like we all become a part of the same thing that's happening. And everybody feels such a connection to it that, yeah, it's inspiring.
If people want to check out your music, is it on YouTube?
Mhm.
What's the name of your channel?
So if you go to my name, Seth Leaf Kruzanski, and you can see I have videos on there. I have tons of meditations. I have some of the videos that I made with my band. Yeah, it's all up there.
What about your book? Is it on Amazon or a website if people want to learn more about it?
It is on Amazon. Um, you can read all the reviews and everything that's there, but it's also on my website. And I'm giving away copies, digital copies for free. And for people who are in the US, for $7, you just pay shipping and I'll sign it and send it to them. But if not, then they can get it on Amazon.
What's the name of your website?
SethLeaf.com, my first and middle name, Leaf like a plant, Leaf.
If people want to reach out to you and ask you questions, are you open to that? So,
Mm-hmm.
how do they contact you?
Through my website. Yep. You just contact me and I'll get it.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
A lot of music related stuff coming out. Sound healing, but not, people are playing all these singing bowls and all that. And I love it. It's great, but I'm bringing something more lively to it. Something that's very activating of all of these perceptual centers because again, like I said in the beginning, we all have this. We all are this. But we're functioning at such a low perceptual capacity that we can't, there's so much that just goes right by us and that we can't see or hear or know or feel. But when you activate these dormant perceptual centers that are in all of us, then you start to become more conscious of the consciousness itself, this fabric of life, this life force. And what I'm going to be offering is for people to be able to tune into that a lot quicker and build these perceptual or activate these dormant perceptual centers. So I'm very excited for that.
Seth, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
If we, no matter what we're going through, no matter how difficult, no matter how we struggle, if you as an individual can find it within yourself to make peace with how you perceive all of the external circumstances, or maybe if you're physically sick, if you can literally make peace with it, put that little smile on your face and you feel it. And it might feel like you're faking it to make it. And in the beginning, it might feel like that. But if you keep putting that smile on, you keep relaxing your body, you will literally build the habit of being and feeling this state of gratitude and joy for life. And the more you make a habit of it, the more it convinces you that your attention is well spent, well focused.
Seth,
Yeah,
thank you for your message and thank you for being my guest.
you're awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks for watching the Jeff Mara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.